Hello there, and welcome to episode 6 of Killer Cures with me, Max Taylor. In this episode, we're going to take a break from learning about all the groundbreaking scientific techniques that we've been looking at, and look instead at the scientists themselves and see how they ended up doing what they're doing. So, why might you consider a science career?
I'm fortunate enough to have had a teacher that let me stay and just play. So I played with experiments and just watched stuff happen and changed things here, changed things there. And I thought that was it was cool to me. And I didn't know people could make a living doing that. It gets a little more complicated, obviously.
So I always loved the ocean. I grew up very far from the ocean, so I used to watch Jacques Cousteau movies, and I just always loved the ocean, and I always wanted to be close to the ocean. So that's why I studied marine biology for my undergraduate studies, and then moved to Australia, where I was really close to the coral reef. And then I discovered that people were studying the oceans or the ocean's creatures to develop new drugs and drug leads, and that really brought me to the cone snail field.
You know, I expected that I would be working in a hospital with blood samples and bacterial cultures and so forth, and I was just told that would be boring by my advisors in college, and so I fell into this, and CONUS was just so interesting. And as I said before, we've never run out of things to explore. There's so much.
And there was a undergraduate student that was there giving the tour, and he seemed to be enjoying himself, and I said, well, gee, how did you get this job? And he said, well, I was offered a scholarship through the biology department. If you wind up getting a scholarship, you might circle back and talk to Toto and see if there's a possibility for a job.
Yeah, I started collecting shells in the Philippines as a kid. When I was in high school, those of us who were interested in biology, that teacher took us to this shell collectors club. The same teacher, her name was Dolly Hernandez, when I was a senior in high school, showed me a Time magazine cover of the president of Caltech. And there was a cover story on this guy and on Caltech. And she said, you should go to this school. And when I was about to finish my degree, I decided, well, my teacher said I should go to Caltech. And I was so naive that I didn't really apply to go anywhere else. And I just applied to go to this one school. And fortunately, I was accepted.
It can involve traveling to interesting places and seeing more of the world.
I first came as a PhD student, visiting PhD student, while I was doing my PhD in Australia on cone snail venoms. And Toto is known everywhere in the world. So I was very happy to join his lab for a few weeks, just a visit over the summer. And then I liked the work so much that I kept coming back for visits. The Philippines, I think, is just so rich and diverse there that I think people that live there and kids that live there should just be so excited about where they live. And I think when you live somewhere, you take that for granted and you think that's normal because, you know, that's how you grew up and that's your life. But as you come from the outside and you look at the biodiversity in the Philippines and you go scuba diving there or go to the markets and see some of the things that live there, it's just fascinating and it's pretty unique. So I think it would be great if Filipino kids were very interested in their biodiversity because it's very unusual.
Scientists are always breaking new ground, so there isn't much risk of getting bored.
Sometimes we just discover something that's really interesting and we have no idea really what it's going to lead to. And that's the value of just kind of pursuing basic discoveries in the first place. But once you find something interesting, then really using your creativity to say, okay, what are the implications here? Where might we go with this?
I'm showing this to Toto and to the lab. Actually, I was doing a lab meeting and I said, these are the things I found. And I find this insulin. I don't really know what to make of that because nobody had ever found something like that in venom. And then he just looks at me with like big eyes, and then he says, just stop whatever you're doing, stop that now, and just focus on that, because that's going to be an interesting discovery.
You have the opportunity to change directions throughout your career.
I mean, my PhD advisor, a wonderful man named Norman Davidson, he would say to me, well, you know, you could do that experiment and publish another paper, but, you know, you've already learned what you're going to learn from that, so why don't you try something else? And so I think that was very, very insightful.
Okay, so this is the story. I was not involved with Toto when I was in MSI. You know, I worked with Drusella, a different group, still looking for drugs, but not. I just got involved, really involved when I was here.
From Calcutta, I went to the Bronx in New York. That's where I did my PhD in biophysics. And then I went to Long Island, which is Brookhaven National Lab is there. And I worked there, did my first postdoc there. And my second postdoc, I went to Madison, Wisconsin. That's where I worked with Howard Temin. And then I came to Boulder, Colorado. I used to work for a biotech company over there.
The work is challenging and can be very rewarding.
In terms of setbacks, there are many when you're a scientist. I think being a scientist is never easy, because you come up with a hypothesis and then you need to test it. And most of the time, at least early on in your career, you're wrong. But then you have these fantastic rewards that happen once a year or so. You discover something, or you stumble across something that nobody else has ever found.
There's plenty of freedom to have some fun along the way.
It was just extremely fun to come into the lab and be finding something new, kind of feeling like you're pushing the margins, discovery.
No, I think that's everything. I think you do need to enjoy yourself along the way, right? I think the main thing is that you should really like your work.
This is the hard part, because right now we're just trying to verify if it's true or not.
And I also love discoveries. So some people discover something and then they look into the very mechanism of how something works. I'm always much more excited about the initial discovery, so I think I'm just going to keep looking for interesting things.
And so when I first came to Utah, I looked around for a place that would be fun to work. I mean, basically with me, I like having fun doing things that I do. And anybody who lets me have fun, I mean, I kind of try to accommodate and work over there.
You could get to work on finding solutions to the real problems faced by humanity.
And then I did my postdoc with somebody called Howard Temin, and he discovered reverse transcriptase that everybody uses to convert RNA to DNA. And I was very lucky to be able to go work with him. And he got his Nobel Prize also in biology and medicine.
You may even discover something that leads to you being remembered long after you're gone.
And, you know, the other thing he said that I will always remember is that, you know, no matter what you do and how great it is, you will be forgotten. In the future, nobody will remember you. But if you've actually discovered something and made a scientific contribution, that will always be remembered. And, you know, I think in some ways, it's a good way to think about why you want to do what you want to do, right?
So, say you're interested. What does it take to be a scientist? How about some tips on getting started in a science career?
I say you have to be curious. Like, the way it worked out for me, I was curious, I played around and I experimented, but also you have to work hard, obviously. So science is about how much you're going to work, but how do you stay curious? Are you passionate about what you're doing? Otherwise, it can seem kind of boring.
I think if you have a scientific mind, you do realize that at a fairly young age, when you're very curious about the world and you want to understand things and you kind of notice early on that not that many people are like that. So if you do discover that you have a scientific interest, then just go for it and pursue it, and you have to be resilient. And as long as you're interested in the work, there'll be so many rewards. And you have to be motivated and interested in what you do. But if you think that that's for you, then just stay with it.
I would say that while it would be helpful that you're really good in science and math, I think the best scientists out there are the ones who have passion, the natural curiosity, and the stamina to actually finish research. I think for young people, I think if you have that curiosity, if you could actually sustain or you have the stamina to actually find out for yourself an answer for a question that nobody has answered yet, I think that's enough for you to actually become a scientist.
I think the important thing probably is to be curious. I mean, it's kind of a general term that everybody will use it. You have to get some interest in finding out something. And I think the other important thing might be, it took me a long time to figure out, that things are interrelated. And what you learn from one field or one system, you can use it in another system. And that, you should have some fun in life. And do things that interest you.
STEM, science, technology, math, and engineering. The more you know about all of those different areas, because they all come into play. I mean, you've seen the guys down there that build stuff, right? I mean, they're engineering their own apparatus to analyze things. It's really helpful to know, and the math, of course, so that you can do the statistical analysis and analyze these transcriptomes and so forth.
I think the first thing is really to be open to possibilities. I certainly had no intention of becoming a researcher. I think since you don't know what you don't know, it's very helpful to find a way to be associated with a mentor, someone who has succeeded in some way, someone who can give you some practical guidance, and you can just kind of get your feet wet, see if it's something that you enjoy doing or not, and go from there.
First off, don't compare yourself to other people. A lot of people compare their intelligence to other people. I wasn't the best student, but my talents really complement science very well. The other thing I would recommend is go to your teacher's office hours, talk to your teachers, try to develop mentorship. Because for me, I have had a line of mentors that have guided me into science. And it's really important to gather mentors, because what that does is gives you confidence to pursue a difficult career.
Sadly, this is the final episode of Killer Cures with me, Max Taylor. I hope you've enjoyed watching it, and I look forward to seeing the scientific advances that our generation makes, particularly as we continue the hunt for more killer cures.